I thought my stepmom finally wanted to make peace. After nearly a decade of tension, backhanded comments, and cold stares at every family gathering, she called me up, said she was making dinner, and asked if I'd come over. She said she missed me, said she wanted us to be a family again. But the moment I stepped into her house, she accused me of stealing her daughter's business. And the worst part? My father just sat there and watched it happen. But Regina, she didn't know I came with receipts. And she picked the wrong daughter to lie about. My name is Sarah Elowin, and I was raised to believe that hard work, honesty, and kindness were enough to keep the people you love close. But when my mother died, all that changed. I was 17 when my dad remarried. Regina came into our lives like a polished hurricane, designer heels, real estate money, and a daughter she praised like royalty. Her name was Alenia. Perfect grades, pageant smile, always knew how to work a room. And me? I was just the quiet art kid who couldn't even look Regina in the eye without feeling like a walking inconvenience. They never said it out loud, but I knew. Regina already had her perfect daughter. She didn't need a leftover from my father's first life. After college, I barely kept in touch. I started my own graphic design business, working out of a crumbling studio apartment with Wi-Fi that barely functioned. No investors. No family backing me. Just late nights, burned-out coffee makers, and too many weeks living on dry cereal. But I made it work. And slowly it grew. Until one day, someone I hadn't heard from in a long time popped up in my inbox. It was Alenia. She messaged me out of the blue. Said she was thinking of starting a personal brand and wanted to pick my brain about digital marketing. At first, I thought it was strange. We were never close. In fact, I distinctly remembered her laughing once when Regina made a comment about me being more comfortable behind a screen than in a family. But I didn't hold grudges. Or, at least, I tried not to. So I replied. She asked questions about branding, email lists, how I built my client pipeline. I gave her a few pointers, shared some tips, even sent her a couple of PDF guides I'd made for my interns. She thanked me, and that was that. Or so I thought. Months passed. My business kept growing. I landed 2 big contracts that summer, one with an eco-friendly fashion startup and one with a wellness app that exploded on social. And then came the dinner invite. Regina called. Said she wanted to cook for me. Said my dad missed me. Said maybe it was time we all tried again. I should have known. But I said yes. I walked into their house, and everything looked staged. Table was set too perfectly. Candles burning, wine already poured. Regina greeted me with that glazed smile she always used when company was over. And Alenia, she was already seated, tapping on her phone like she hadn't been coached on every second of this encounter. We didn't even get to the salad before it started. Regina folded her napkin, set it on the table, and said, "Saren, we need to talk about your business." She said the word like it had quotation marks around it. My stomach turned. I looked at my dad, he avoided my eyes. Regina leaned forward. "Alenia showed me your website," she said. "And, well, it's almost a carbon copy of hers. Her designs. Her logo structure. Even her mission statement. We're just concerned. Concerned. As if this wasn't a setup." Alenia chimed in, her voice tight and syrupy. "I just feel really hurt. I trusted you." And then they pulled out papers, screenshots, printouts, timelines. I saw my own content, repurposed, twisted, and paired next to her rebranded page like a courtroom exhibit. I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. Regina crossed her arms. "This could be considered theft, Saren. Investors are already pulling back. Do you have any idea what you've cost my daughter?" And my father, my own father, just sat there, silent. Not even a question in my defense. I felt a rage I hadn't known I was capable of. But I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I reached into my bag and pulled out my laptop. I opened folders. I clicked timestamps. "I don't know who you think you're dealing with," I said, my voice steady, "but I document everything I make. Every logo, every file, every revision. You want proof? I have 5 years worth." I opened my source files. Showed creation dates. Metadata. I pulled up the exact email Alenia had sent me months ago, where she asked for branding help, where I had given her mock-ups. The same mock-ups she claimed I stole. I turned the screen toward them. Look at the dates, I said. She didn't build anything. She copied what I gave her, and then pretended it was hers. Regina's face went pale. Alenia froze. Then the lies started unraveling. She didn't mean to, Regina said quickly. This was just a misunderstanding. A miscommunication. No, I said. This was a con. And you both know it. Just then, Alenia broke. The polished persona cracked. Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down. I didn't think you'd fight back, she whispered. She looked at Regina. You said she wouldn't. Regina's mouth tightened. I stood. I looked my father in the eyes. You watched them ambush me, lie about me, drag my name through the mud, and you said nothing. He opened his mouth. Closed it. I thought I lost you when Mom died, I said. But you were never taken from me. You walked away, and I think you liked it better that way. And then I left. I cut ties with all of them that night, filed a cease and desist against Alenia's brand, sent every piece of proof to her sponsors and partners. Within a week, half her deals were gone. The other half vanished when my story started to circulate in small business circles. And Regina? She tried to clean it up online. Tried to twist it like I was vindictive, ungrateful, unstable. But the truth was louder. And I never looked back. Some families will never see you as more than a threat, even when all you ever offered was love. But the truth? I'd rather stand alone with my integrity than beg for scraps at a table that was never meant for me. Would you have walked away like I did? It would have been easy to stay bitter, to let what they did harden me into someone I wouldn't recognize. But the truth is, after the smoke cleared, I didn't feel broken. I felt free. Because once you stop trying to prove your worth to people determined not to see it, your hands suddenly feel a lot less heavy. My energy went back into my business, into healing, into building something on my terms. The emails started flooding in. Clients I hadn't heard from in months reached out to say they admired how I handled the situation. A podcast invited me on to talk about protecting your creative work. Even a few art schools asked if I'd be willing to speak to their seniors about resilience in the design world. I said yes to all of it, but there was one message that shook me. It was from Regina's sister, my step-aunt, technically. We'd only met once at the wedding, and I remembered her being the only person there who spoke to me like I mattered. Her email was short. She said, I heard what happened. I'm sorry. You didn't deserve any of it. For what it's worth, this isn't the first time Regina's pushed someone else's daughter aside to make her own look better. That line haunted me, because it meant this was bigger than me. It wasn't about business, or branding, or even pride. It was about control. About a woman who couldn't stand not being the center of her carefully curated universe, and who raised her daughter to mirror every ruthless edge she carried. And I realized maybe Alenia never stood a chance. But that wasn't my responsibility to fix. I could mourn what never was. The stepmother who might have loved me, the father who could have stood up, the family dinners that didn't end in betrayal. Or I could pour that grief into growth. So I did. I launched something new, an online course for young creatives, especially women, teaching them how to protect their work, build their brand ethically, and recover when people try to steal what they didn't earn. I called it Blueprint Without Permission. The name came from something Alenia once said in that dinner, in a tone soaked in mockery. You think you invented personal branding? You act like no one's allowed to use your blueprint. Well, she was right. No one is allowed to use my blueprint. Not without permission. And I made sure every student who took that course understood the same thing. What you build has value, even if the people closest to you try to gaslight you out of it. The course took off. Within 6 months, it became the most successful product I'd ever released. Not because I had the most followers, not because I ran flashy ads, but because people could smell the truth in it. This wasn't theory. This was real life. And I didn't just teach them how to brand, I taught them how to fight back. Sometimes with copyright claims, sometimes with contracts, sometimes with silence. Because there's power in walking away, too. It was around that time that I got another unexpected message. From my dad. No subject line. Just a single sentence. "I'm sorry I wasn't the father you needed." I stared at it for a long time. And then I closed my laptop. Because forgiveness isn't about what they deserve. It's about what I need to carry or not carry moving forward. And I didn't need his silence anymore. I needed mine. Weeks turned into months. The house that once stood as a symbol of family dinners and 4 smiles? It went on the market. Regina's real estate empire took a hit after few influencers cut ties with Alenia's brand. Turns out, reputation spreads faster than money does. I didn't celebrate. But I also didn't feel sorry. Actions have consequences. I used to wonder what kind of woman I'd become if my mom had lived. If Regina had never entered our lives. If I'd grown up in a house that didn't feel like a competition I never signed up for. But I think I know now. Because I became her anyway. Resilient. Grounded. Fierce without being cruel. Creative without compromise. And one thing's for sure. I didn't need anyone's permission to become her. Maybe that's the part that scared Regina the most. That I did it without her. That I succeeded without shortcuts. That her daughter, despite all her polish, had to steal my light just to cast a shadow. It's strange, isn't it? How people will try to break you and then resent you for shining through the cracks. But that's the thing about cracks. They don't make you broken. They make you real. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to take up space. So, if you've ever had someone weaponize your kindness, if you've ever been erased from your own story, if you've ever been asked to play small just so someone else could feel big, let this be a reminder. You don't owe anyone your silence. And sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is tell the truth. Because lies are loud. But proof echoes forever. A few days after that message from my father, I saw a photo on social media. It was a snapshot of Regina and Alenia at a networking gala. Both were smiling, but the caption from the event page told a different story. Alenia Cade withdraws keynote after backlash. Brand image questioned. I didn't like the way it made me feel. Not proud. Not vindicated. Just done. Done carrying the weight of what they did. Done wondering if justice was enough. Done wishing for apologies that would never come. Because what I had now was peace. And peace isn't quiet. It's a roar. A steady, grounding hum that reminds you. You don't need to be anyone else's version of worthy. I remember walking through my tiny studio that afternoon, running my fingers over the canvases drying along the walls. Some were commissions. Some were pieces I painted just to feel again. One had the phrase, "I built this with no blueprint but my own." I smiled. There was a time I would have given anything to be invited back into that house. To sit at their table. To be chosen. But I wasn't waiting for a seat anymore. I'd built my own table. And the people around it? They didn't just clap when I succeeded. They stayed when it was hard. They defended me when it was quiet. They showed up without needing a spotlight. And that mattered more than any forced family photo ever could. Weeks later, I got a message from a student in my course. She said, "Your story gave me the courage to press charges against the boss who stole my work. I didn't win the lawsuit, but I reclaimed my name. That was the win I needed." I cried when I read that. Because that's the thing no one tells you about justice. It doesn't always look like courtrooms or viral takedowns. Sometimes it's quieter. More personal. Like getting your name back. Like painting again after months of staring at blank walls. Like smiling without apology. But there's one more thing I haven't told you. One last thread in this story. It happened during a local art show. I had a few pieces displayed, mostly abstract work inspired by identity, memory, and the fragments we leave behind in other people's lives. I was helping one of the curators clean up when someone tapped my shoulder. I turned. It was Alenia. Her eyes were sunken. Her hair was a different shade. She looked smaller. Like the image was breaking. "I didn't come here to fight," she said. "I just wanted to see if you were as good as people say." I nodded. "Did you?" She looked around the gallery. Stopped in front of one of the pieces I'd titled Inheritance. It was jagged, chaotic, raw, painted with a palette knife and full of overlapping colors that never blended cleanly. "Did you paint this after?" she gestured. "Everything?" "Yes." "Thought so." She paused. "You know, I don't hate you." I tilted my head. "I don't need you to hate me. I need you to stop pretending you didn't hurt me." Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she turned toward the door. But just before she left, she looked back and said, "You won." And I said, "No." I survived. I never saw her again after that. But I think about that moment often. About how strange it is that the same people who tried to erase you will someday pretend they admired your strength. But I didn't rise from spite. I rose because I had to. Because no one was coming to save me. Because sometimes the only way to reclaim your story is to write the ending yourself. So if you're listening to this, and you've ever been invited into someone's world only to be betrayed at the door, if you've ever been accused, shamed, or blamed for shining too brightly, if someone has ever tried to take what you built, claim it as theirs, and smile while doing it, remember this. You are not the villain in their twisted retelling. You are the author. And authors don't beg for permission. They write. They rebuild. They rise. I never stole Alinia's business. But she tried to steal my name, my dignity, and my work. And in the end, that was her biggest mistake. Because when you come for someone who built everything from nothing, you better be ready for what happens when they have nothing left to lose. I used to think closure came in neat packages, wrapped in apologies, sealed with acknowledgement, and handed to you with grace. But this was not that. No one apologized. No one tried to make it right. And maybe the hardest truth I had to swallow was this. Sometimes closure is just acceptance. Not the kind that says what they did was okay, but the kind that says I won't let it keep me small anymore. When I walked out of that gallery after seeing Alinia for the last time, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel superior. I just felt clear. It was like all the noise had finally drained out of my head. The blame, the questions, the aching what-ifs. All replaced by this quiet realization. Not everyone will understand your story. Not everyone will own what they did to you. And that's okay. Because their denial doesn't cancel your truth. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I never stepped into that house again. If I'd ignored that invitation and stayed far away. Would Regina still have twisted the narrative against me? Would Alinia still have tried to take my work? Maybe. But I've stopped playing that game in my head. You know, the one where you rewind the moment, rearrange the scene, try to make sense of a betrayal that had nothing to do with your worth and everything to do with their insecurity. Because that's what I see so clearly now. People only steal from you when they believe they can't create for themselves. They copy. They take. They accuse. They try to destroy what they didn't have the courage to build. And in doing so, they reveal more about them than about you. To anyone listening right now who has had someone come after their work, their voice, their space, their light, I want you to hear this, because I needed it once too. You are not too much. You are not difficult for protecting what's yours. You are not arrogant for refusing to shrink. Your clarity, your talent, your refusal to fold, that's not a threat. That's your birthright. But to people like Regina and Alinia and everyone like them, it feels like a threat, because they built their lives on the approval of others, on image, on manipulation, on performance. And when you stand in your truth with nothing to hide, you become everything they fear. I used to crave validation from them, not just compliments, belonging, recognition, that warm, elusive feeling of being truly seen. But their acceptance was conditional. Their love, if you could call it that, came with strings tied, so tight they cut into your skin. And once I realized that, once I accepted that their version of family required me to betray myself, I stopped trying to fit. I stopped explaining. I stopped defending. Because the version of me they loved was never the real me anyway. I've built something better now. Not just a business. Not just an income. But a life. A life where the people around me speak truth, even when it's hard. Where I don't have to apologize for wanting more. Where I can create without walking on eggshells. And it's not perfect. There are still days when the memory stings. Still moments where I see a photo or hear a phrase and the anger flickers back to life. But I let it pass. I breathe. I paint. I live. Because healing doesn't mean the scar disappears. It means the wound doesn't control you anymore. I think we all reach a point where we have to decide. Do I keep chasing approval from people who need me small? Or do I step into the life I was meant to build, even if I have to build it alone at first? It's terrifying. It's lonely. But it's worth it. Because slowly, the right people find you. The ones who don't flinch at your honesty. Who don't need you to dim your light so they can feel better about themselves. Who celebrate your wins without turning it into competition. And once you find that kind of community, even if it's just one person at first, you'll never go back. So maybe this story wasn't just about a stepmother's manipulation or a stepsister's betrayal. Maybe it was about learning to trust myself again, to reclaim the pieces of me I once handed to people who didn't know what to do with them. And if my voice is shaking a little now, it's not from fear. It's from the weight of finally speaking the full truth, out loud, without shame. I don't know what Regina tells people now, or whether Alenia still sees me as a threat, but I've stopped caring. Because when you spend enough time choosing yourself, your peace becomes louder than their opinion. And that's when you know you've won. So let me ask you something. Have you ever been made to feel guilty for shining? Has someone ever tried to take credit for what you built? Or worse, tried to convince others it was theirs to begin with? If you have, you're not alone. And I hope my story reminds you that survival doesn't always look like a perfect ending. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your dignity intact. Sometimes it looks like staying quiet while they talk because you no longer need their approval. Sometimes it looks like painting a new chapter without asking anyone for permission. Would you have forgiven her? Would you have stayed silent? Or would you, like me, have told the truth? Even if your voice shook? Let me know in the comments. Because stories like this, they don't just belong to me. They belong to all of us.